Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Mentoring Moments. I'm here with my main man, Kevin Zaw, and he's got, as per usual, a great agenda lined up for us today. So over to you, Kevin, and I'll let you fire off with your first question, and we'll get stuck straight into it.
Yeah, so we had a conversation about LinkedIn in some of our previous sessions. And in one of the LinkedIn comments that I saw from you after following your LinkedIn, you communicated to someone that headless for B2B is mostly an unnecessary nightmare unless it's part of the native architecture of the core monolithic platform. And I wanted to see if you were able to expand on that a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reality is that most B2B brands are struggling to adopt e-commerce in any way. They're really struggling, right? A lot of B2B brands still don't do e-commerce at all. Or if they do e-commerce, their form of e-commerce is EDI or punch out, but it's not self-service e-commerce. And so a lot of these brands, they are really struggling to see a way forward in terms of tech stack, in terms of capability, in terms of UI, UX, etc. And there's absolutely no question, and I don't think anybody who's even a headless or mock proponent would argue that headless is a very advanced architecture. It's a very advanced solution stack. And now I'm going to differentiate headless from composable because I think that almost all solutions are composable today. It's very rare. I think I've said this on previous conversations with you. There really is no one platform or one technology or one ERP that can do absolutely everything. It's difficult to find an ERP that can be a CRM, that can be a PIM, that can be an omni-channel solution, that can do point of sale, that can do e-commerce, that can be a CDP, that can have everything pre-integrated together in a suite of modules that you can just flick on at the flick of a switch. And even for the platforms that purport to be able to do that, in my experience, they can't. NetSuite purports to be a full end-to-end omni-channel platform. It's not. And I love NetSuite. I recommend NetSuite frequently in the right situations. But it is not an all-in-one platform. It does a few things very well, and it tackles a few particularly retail use cases very well. But is it an all-in-one solution that if you run NetSuite, you don't need anything else in your business? Absolutely not. I don't think even the current users of NetSuite would argue that. And so my position is that you have to use best tools for the job. And so there's always some form. I have never, off the top of my head, I can't think of a single project that I've been involved with in the last 20 plus years that didn't have some form of system integration required, that didn't have some form of data transfer, that didn't have some form of sharing data across systems, sharing workflows and processes across systems, sharing capabilities across systems. It just doesn't happen because there is no one size fits all solution out there, no matter what any vendor tells you, including Oracle or any IBM or literally anybody, any enterprise software in the market. They're going to try to be all things to all people, Salesforce, etc. They're going to try to be all things to all people because they want to sell you as many modules from their stack as they can. And they'll sell you on the pre-integration. They'll sell you on the native data formats and data structures and data architecture. They're going to sell you on transactional data being able to be fed into sales workflows and into help desk workflows, customer service, fulfillment. They're going to sell you on this concept that an all-in-one is going to give you a more holistic solution than a separate but integrated solution. And I don't buy it because I have yet to see a solution that works for every merchant. And I have yet to see a single solution, even in the right use cases, that does every single function from a business management perspective in a business. It just doesn't exist. And so because of that, if we set composable to the side, because the reality is every merchant I deal with, they are composable by nature because they're using a suite, a stack of technology that have to be then system integrated together. So if we set that aside for the moment and we focus just on the headless piece, headless is more for developers and technical people than it is for merchants or their customers. That's a fact. There's no question about that. Headless is by technicians for technicians. It is a chance for them to flex their development muscle. It is an opportunity for them to create massive lock-in for the merchants that they do headless implementations for. It creates such a stronghold of both internal and external capability dependencies that it makes sense why everybody's pushing headless. Or let's put it this way, certain agencies and certain technology vendors are pushing headless because it provides the greatest level of lock-in. Now, does it not have any benefits for merchants or no benefits for end customers? No, I'm not saying that at all. And in fact, in the D2C and B2C world, where there is a super high level of design requirements, functional requirements, custom workflow requirements, etc., and basically hyper custom customer journeys. I was consulting to, this is going back over a year ago now, and I was consulting to a brand that their product and their customer journey was unlike anything I had ever seen before. And it was a combination of digital and physical products. So they had physical merch that was part of the customer journey, but then there was a significant digital and mobile app component that you bought as a bundle. So you're buying these physical merch goods, but then you're also buying this journey that you take in real life via your mobile app. It was basically a gamified exercise platform. So it was a combination of a platform that got people to exercise, but also had elements of treasure hunting and had elements of physical awards if you achieved certain things within the app, because it tracked where you were and it tracked how fast you covered a certain distance. And when you uncovered certain things in physical spaces and you uploaded that to the app, then it would show your progress through a specific journey, right? And so this was so non-standard. It was not regular e-commerce. There was no like home category product cart like it was a completely custom customer journey from the moment you landed on the site to the moment you went through that whole journey flow, downloading the app, getting the courses that you had already purchased loaded into the app with certain codes that would activate those journeys in the app. It was just a really unique journey that no out of the box e-commerce platform could service. And they had been historically on WooCommerce and they had customized the crap out of WooCommerce. And then they ended up with a whole bunch of legacy tech debt, which meant that their ability to roll out new products was really difficult. They were basically locked in to the WooCommerce and they were locked into that architecture, right? And they needed to be able to have a whole bunch of custom cart and checkout pages for these different journeys that they were sending people to based on paid marketing campaigns. And they needed to customize every one of those as a unique landing page to get someone into that journey flow of getting on board with the business. And they were a perfect use case for headless, like absolutely perfect. With any other e-commerce platform, you would have to so bastardize the front end and you would launch with the same amount of tech debt that they already had on this old legacy platform. So they needed to have a completely custom React-based front end to be able to build these. And then what they needed is they ideally needed a headless checkout platform like Bold Checkout that could be integrated in so that depending on what campaign they came from, what region they came from, like by geofencing and also IP detection, they wanted to completely customize that landing page to where it would load the right landing page in the right customer visitor scenario. And this required, like, everything was custom. There was not, apart from Bold Checkout, which was semi off the shelf, but that's a headless checkout system. And you build all the UI components custom. So they were a perfect use case for a headless build because there's no off the shelf e-commerce system that could get anywhere near where they needed to be in terms of customization at scale. And so their workflow, and they also had a team of 6 in-house developers. So that were already building on WooCommerce, and they had already been building on WooCommerce for 4 years. And they came to the realization, geez, we need to go clean sheet on this. We need to go with a full headless implementation, full custom front end, system integrated with our back office and our multiple ERP systems. Because they had multiple ERP systems depending on whether it was a digital product or a physical product that they were servicing, and then making those data flows available to the mobile app that somebody downloaded. So I said all that to say that headless absolutely has its place. I'm not shooting it down wholesale, but the reality is the vast majority of B2B merchants, they just need to be able to transact, and they just need to be able to support some reasonably complex, not necessarily crazy complex, but some reasonably complex CPQ functionality, depending on the complexity of their product, that can be serviced by most major e-commerce platforms that specialize in B2B and have a CPQ capability in the platform. Or you can go with a more standardized e-commerce platform and then take a third-party CPQ platform and system integrate that into the e-commerce platform and make the UI components of the CPQ surfaced through the e-commerce platform. So B2B is about a decade behind B2C and D2C. And so the reason I say that in particular, headless is not necessary for B2B is because they aren't even transactional yet. So the last thing they need is to start thinking about all the additional layers of complexity of a headless implementation, because there's orders of magnitude greater complexity in a headless build. And you're oftentimes not able to take easy advantage of the ecosystem and app stores built around these native monolithic platforms. It's very difficult because usually those apps are built, like if you look at Shopify or BigCommerce or any of the other e-commerce platforms out there that kind of have an app store ecosystem, those apps are designed to take advantage of all of the native storefront plumbing of that platform. So when they insert code into the native theme engine, they get a predictable outcome. So they say, okay, here's the storefront code. When we add a component to this theme, we know exactly how this is going to look on the front end. We can have it assume general styles of the site really easily. We can use all the Bootstrap components, and it's just easy for them to have build a predictable app experience, both for the administrator and the front end user that is exposed to those UI components. With headless, all that goes out the window. You can install the app, but then you have to hope that app has API endpoints that you then can surface through your custom UI. And if they don't, you're screwed because it's designed to work with the native theme engine. And there's many more reasons. I could spend an hour talking about this, but the reality is that most B2B brands are just trying to get up and running with the vast majority of their catalog in a transactional way so that when customers log in, they see the right prices, they see their right MOQs, they see their right locations for deliveries, they see their right shared shopping lists, they have the right permission set for escalations of purchases, whether it be like a junior buyer, senior buyer, procurement specialist or authorizer, that then you create an order and then it has to be automatically escalated to a boss to be signed off on. That purchase can go through. They want to be able to see their outstanding invoices and statements, where they stand in terms of their credit history, and at what point would they hit credit stop. There's just these really core, super basic, relatively speaking, basic functionality that a lot of B2B brands just need to get up and running and be able to even sell online. And headless is an unnecessary complexity that they don't need to be thinking about yet, because the ultimate benefits to them. So usually headless proponents are talking about performance, right? They're saying it's much more performant, right? It's a much more lightweight front end. You don't have to effectively hide components of a standard monolithic storefront that you don't want to expose to the customer. Instead of just hiding those through CSS and JS, you just simply don't have them. The code is not even there, right? In a headless environment, you only build exactly the experience you're trying to build. And that's the upside. And so it does have performance benefits. In your standard B2C, D2C environment, that makes sense because you want to make your front end as lean and fast and performant as possible, because you're having so many concurrent visitors, you're having so many concurrent checkouts, you're usually having ultra high volumes of transactions through these front ends. In the B2B world, it tends to be much lower number of transactions, but much higher AOV and much higher CLV. So the front end performance is not as much of a focus. It's front end functionality is the focus for B2B, not speed and performance. Because you want your customers to be able to grab their CSV of their PO, upload that whole CSV. It might have 50 line items in that CSV. You want them to be able to upload it on the front end, populate the cart, check out. You want to have this core suite of functionality. Most B2B brands want to deliver a core suite of functionality that is very functional in nature and much, much less UI, UX, brand, feel, emotion focused, right? Whereas a lot of your D2C and B2C brands, they're focused on pixel perfect design. Oh, I want my site to look like Apple. I want it to be minimalist. I want it to be clean. I want it to communicate our brand values. I want to create these avatars, and I want to have these 3 or 4 customer journeys that we're supporting along the way and giving them the right information at the right time. I want to have search, merch, personalization. I want to have all these UI focused elements. I want to have all these customer journey focused elements and brand focused elements, typically in the B2C, D2C world. And in the B2B world, it's shit. I just want this thing to work right. And I just want to make sure that my customers are being charged the right price for the right bloody product. And I want them to be able to request a quote on the front end if they want to buy more than their usual amount, or if they want to requisition a product that we don't yet carry for them, but they want to request it and they want us to source it for them. We want them to be able to do that in an easy, seamless way. We want them to be able to track the process of the RFP or RFQ process. We want to be able to them to track that from the moment where they submit it to the moment we respond to them and everything in between. We want them to be able to track, for example, electronically the RMA process, because the RMA process in the B2B world can be very complex. And we want them to be able to lodge an RMA online. We want to be able to grant them their RMA number online. We want to be able to either have them send it to us or us issue a pickup. And we want them to be able to track that all the way from the time that it leaves their door to it's received back on our door, it's inspected, it's quarantined, and it's either it's processed or it's declined, whatever. We want them to be able to see that whole entire process. And then we want, and then we have the will call situation in the B2B world and being able to support all these different subtle nuances of will call, whether that be collecting from a warehouse or a physical retail store location. And do they want to pay online and just collect, or do they want to order online but go in and pay on account when they actually collect the goods? There's lots of different nuances in the customer journeys in the B2B world that are slightly different to the B2C world. So I know that's a very long-winded way to answer a simple question around headless, but I felt we had to go down this rabbit hole at least a little bit, because in the B2B world, it is function over form every single time. In B2C and D2C, it is form over function almost every single time. And I'll say one final thing, and then I'll turn it back over to you. In the B2C and D2C world, usually when I'm consulting to a B2C or a D2C merchant, I'm dealing with the marketing team. They own maybe a head of e-commerce or an e-commerce manager or a head of digital or a CDO or something like that, kind of owns the project technically inside. But the ones in the business who are making the final decision around the customer experience and the customer journey is usually the marketing team. They're the ones that are defining what that looks like. And so therefore, you're dealing with people who oftentimes are not that technical. And so when they ask for something, they don't necessarily realize what's involved in delivering that from a technical perspective. And so you've got to try to break that down for them without sounding condescending and without making them feel dumb. You have to say, well, yeah, we could do that, but if we tweak this functionality just slightly, it would mean half of the work versus delivering it exactly as you've designed it to be. If we tweak this just slightly and we may descope it just slightly, we could deliver this in half the time with half the budget. But if you insist on having it be exactly this way, yep, we can deliver it, but it's going to cost you twice as much and take twice as long. These are the kind of discussions I'm oftentimes having with marketing teams. Whereas in the B2B world, I'm talking to IT. I'm talking to CTOs, CIOs. I'm talking to sales managers. I'm talking to ops, head of ops. I'm talking to business system specialists. I'm talking to usually the most technical people in the business. That's who I'm talking to in the B2B world. Almost always, not always, but almost always. And in fact, 9 times out of 10, there is no marketing person in a B2B brand. There's a head of sales or a head of RevOps, but oftentimes they don't have a marketing team. And if they have someone in marketing, it's maybe one person. They maybe have a marketing manager or something like that. But usually in the B2B world, they don't own e-commerce projects. It's business system people that own e-commerce projects, because usually you're needing to integrate with ERPs and PIMs and all these other back office systems that are owned by the business systems team. And so these are some of the subtle nuances. And so that's why I wrote what I wrote. And of course, I don't have as much space on LinkedIn to get into this much level of detail, but that's been my experience. And so I'd love your thoughts on that. Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you. And now back to your listening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think that there's a bigger value in functionality with B2B rather than the UI of what
The look and feel, basically.
a look and feel type of site. I think what's really struck to me is when you want your commerce solution to have as much flexibility as possible and be able to leverage as much native functionality, because the moment you start building anything new that's not native out of the platform, it gets much more expensive, a lot more complex to maintain. But sometimes you have to, depending on the business needs, right? But if you have a platform that already can handle that flexibility natively, it just makes it so much easier to be able to handle.
Absolutely nailed it. 100% spot on. And that's why when I go into my consulting engagements, and then we get to the platform and technology stack search and select phase, I'm always trying to guide them down the path of the 80/20 rule, which is basically, okay, here, we have a really clear picture of what your requirements are. Now let's go out and do our search and select process through the lens of these core, maybe Moscow method level of requirements, identification, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, the wish list items. Let's look at our technology stack through that lens and say, okay, any platform we select must have these 23 pieces of functionality out of the box, for example. It would be nice if they had these other 46 pieces of functionality. It would be nice, or some combination of those pieces of functionality out of the box that we didn't have to customize, that are maybe nice to haves. And then when we get to the wish list stuff, it's great. If they have it, awesome, but it is not going to be part of our decision-making process. It's not going to be a deal breaker if they don't have this list of 23 items that are wish list items, right? And so we look at it through those lenses of prioritization in terms of functional requirements and functional capabilities. And then, of course, you also have to weigh that up and balance it against the commercials of that platform. So we might, for example, we might say, okay, we have one platform here that has 90% of the requirements delivered out of the box, but it is 2 or 3 times as expensive as the next platform that only delivers 70% of the functionality out of the box. But we can take that 70% of functionality, we can customize it one time, and that has a one-off cost, but we're not paying the additional annual renewal fee for that license. We're not paying that 2 or 3 times additional cost every year. We're only paying it one time upfront for an additional level of customization and enhancement. And that commercially, from a business case perspective, can sometimes make more sense than picking the platform that has 90 or 95% of the functionality out of the box, but it costs you 2 or 3 times as much. So this is where it starts. The decision-making process is not easy, and it is not 100% clear and straightforward that you just say, well, let's go out there and find all the platforms that can deliver at least 80% of our functionality out of the box, and then we're going to shortlist down to those. It doesn't really work that way, because if the platforms that deliver 80% of the functionality are 2, 3, 4, and in some cases 5 times the cost of the next level tier of platform down that can deliver 60 or 70%, and then with customization can get us 90, 95% of the way there in one-off customization cost, then sometimes it makes sense to do a little bit more bespoke work upfront for the long-term savings of cutting your OpEx in half. So these are very challenging discussions to have with merchants, because there's so much for them to consider. And then when you take into account the cost of custom integrations, maintenance of those integrations, some platforms are easier to integrate with other platforms than others. Sometimes they've got out-of-the-box integrations with some of those other components in the stack. So there's a ton to consider, and it's very rarely a black and white decision, is what I'm saying. It's usually there's gray, and usually there's some form of compromise you're going to have to make. Either whatever way you go, there is no perfect solution for any merchant.
Okay. So this leads me really well to my next question. From my background, I've worked with a lot of enterprise organizations, so multiple different types of solutions. One of them being commerce. It is commerce just being one product out of the enterprise suite of solutions that they have. My question's around trying to understand the vendors that primarily focus on their commerce solution and kind of their ideal customer fit. So some of the ones I listed out were WooCommerce, BigCommerce, Commerce Tools, and Magento. If you can explain to me what your perspective is in terms of their ideal customer fit, an area that they would work well in or where they don't work well in, just so I can better understand the e-commerce landscape.
So I'll take the easiest one first, which is probably WooCommerce. So WooCommerce is it's not a commerce platform in its own right. It's a plugin to a CMS. And so the reality is that I don't consider it a standalone e-commerce platform. It is very basic in nature. It has very basic and limited functionality. It's really targeted at B2C and D2C merchants. It's not really targeted at B2B merchants because it doesn't handle things like price lists out of the box. You have to use further extensions and plugins and customizations to get it to work with B2B. It doesn't have the concept of MOQs. It doesn't have the concept of buying increments. It doesn't have the concept of there's a whole bunch of what I call data primitives in the B2B world that we would just expect there to be out of the box that WooCommerce doesn't. It doesn't have the concept of hierarchical accounts. It only has the concept of individual users. So there's a whole lot of functionality from a B2B perspective that WooCommerce does not have. And it's still, even in the B2C and D2C world, it's targeted at the smaller end of town. So we're talking merchants that are doing definitely sub $50 million a year in revs. And that they're targeting that small end of town that have come off of WordPress. Maybe they started out with a brochure site, they had a CMS, they presented certain information, and then they decided to tack on commerce after the fact. Now, there's some agencies that start out and build WooCommerce sites from scratch. And so they literally build the entire CMS and cart experience they've designed it from the ground up to create much more of a standardized e-commerce experience. But it's hard to do. It requires a lot of customization. There's quite a few accelerator platforms out there for it, like Elementor, and there's some accelerator platforms out there that make it easier to get a WooCommerce site up and running with some of that core commerce functionality built in. There definitely are accelerators out there, so I'm not trying to say it's not suitable for anybody in e-commerce, but particularly for B2B, it is really lacking in some very significant ways. And so I'm a partner with WooCommerce. I don't recommend WooCommerce. The kind of merchants that I work with tend to be doing a minimum of $20 million or more a year in GMV. And as a result of that, and like by far 95% of the merchants I work with are B2B first merchants. And so WooCommerce is just it's a non-starter for those types of merchants. For Magento/Adobe Commerce, I worked in the Magento ecosystem for many years. In fact, I cut my teeth in the Magento ecosystem, and I worked for a Magento Gold partner for a number of years. And so back in the day, when there was no other mainstream e-commerce platforms other than Magento out there, it was amazing. And because they had an open source product, they had an enterprise product, so you could try before you buy. If you had a deep internal technical capability, then you could build on the open source platform or work with a partner or a developer to build that initial platform with no ongoing licensing fees. And then when you were ready to graduate up to the big boys and girls end of town, then you could move up to the enterprise product and get enterprise support and have all this additional enterprise functionality. But that was part of the core platform. But we have to remember it's architected a long time ago. Magento came into its own in 2008, and the fundamental architecture of the platform hasn't changed that much since then, despite what they would have you believe. It's a legacy PHP application. In fact, Adobe doesn't even recommend that you deploy Magento Adobe Commerce nowadays in a monolithic fashion. They recommend Adobe Experience Manager or one of their other front-end technologies to be the front end, and they recommend you just use the core Adobe Commerce platform as your back end, your catalog engine, your promotions engine, your multi-site engine, your language and currency engine, etc., your different checkout and payment methods. They're all managed within the core backend of Magento. It's a very low performance platform in a monolithic. When you deploy it monolithically, it's a very slow legacy architecture platform. It's got low performance without Nginx, without Redis, without all sorts of caching, full page caching, without massive database acceleration and indexing, without some pretty heavy duty hosting and backend engineering. Magento is a very non-performant platform, very low performance platform. So you spend a tremendous amount of money just on sysadmin. Just to get it up, running, and performant and scalable, you spend a tremendous amount of money just on that. Then, of course, you got downtime due to patching because it's not a SaaS platform, so it's not natively patched. You got to actually take down the system. You got to apply patches. You got to test. Then you got to bring it back up again. You got to go into maintenance mode. You got to put up a maintenance page. The reality is that Magento is a legacy architecture. And just because Adobe bought it doesn't make it any less legacy. It's also very expensive. They've raised the prices since Adobe bought it. Their enterprise product has gone up in price substantially since they got acquired. And the reality is, when you think of it through the B2B lens, even for Magento, B2B is still and always was an afterthought. Yes, it has the ability to manage price lists. Yes, it has the ability to do multiple catalogs. Yes, it has the ability to do payment methods by customer. Yes, it has some of the core data primitives that you need in a B2B environment. And it's, of course, infinitely customizable because you have access to the back-end code and the front-end code. So am I saying you cannot use Magento for B2B? No, I'm not. What I'm saying is it's a complex platform to deliver B2B functionality on, requires a high level of customization, and it's an expensive product to build and maintain. So I don't recommend Magento. I don't work with Magento anymore. I'm not a Magento partner anymore. And I think that until they rebuild the platform from the ground up as a native SaaS platform, they're going to really continue to struggle. And I think the market share numbers are continuing to show that. If you go to BuiltWith, you can just see a steady decline in Magento deployments. You can just see the chart, and it's it's just trending down. That's all there is to it. There's a lot of defections. There's a lot of people that have such massive investments in Magento 2 that they won't go away from it anytime soon, but those are legacy investments. And at some point, they're going to have to cut their losses. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to that platform moving forward. BigCommerce is a challenging one. Reuters has just released an article that they're looking to be bought. They're looking to potentially be taken private by private equity. Their share price has basically dropped like a rock since they went public a few years ago. It's lost over 90% of its share values since they went public. They're trying to they acquired Bundle B2B as an app vendor that provides deep capability around B2B on the BigCommerce platform. They haven't rolled that 100% natively into the core platform yet. And so even today, their B2B edition still requires you to install the Bundle B2B app, or what they call the B2B edition app nowadays. And so a lot of that additional layer of B2B functionality is provided by an app-based system as opposed to 100% native inside the core of BigCommerce. Love BigCommerce, love the BigCommerce team. I think they're doing some really good things, and I think they've continued to enhance and extend the core Bundle B2B application and also B2B Ninja, which they acquired. They've continued to roll more and more of that into the native platform. And if they can stay alive long enough, I think they have a real shot at being a really serious B2B contender. But they don't have a PIM system. They don't have order management. There's quite a few things that they don't have. And they don't have really true CPQ capabilities inside the platform. So there is some lacking functionality there, but they have all the core baseline functionality that you need to run a really successful B2B brand at a price that is significantly cheaper.
Who would you say is BigCommerce's target customer? But I guess I'm curious in terms of what would you say the factors where, hey, based off the customer's tech stack or what they're looking for, BigCommerce would be an ideal partner for them.
They're targeting mid-sized enterprises that are price sensitive, that like the idea of a SaaS platform that is Shopify, but has a ton more functionality than Shopify does when it comes to B2B. They're targeting a very similar market, but a slightly higher enterprise class customer than Shopify. They're targeting a similar demographic. However, they're going hardcore. They're trying to move up the enterprise as quickly as possible from a functional perspective and a sales and marketing perspective. And they're trying to move up the B2B enterprise stack as fast as they can. So that's really where they're targeting. They're targeting B2B, and they're targeting mid-size and larger enterprises in the B2C and in D2C space. And to be fair, they have the amount of functionality that BigCommerce offers out of the box versus Shopify, there is literally no comparison. The data primitives that they offer out of the box, the core functionality around price list, the core functionality around facets and filters, the core functionality around store credit, which Shopify doesn't even offer. They don't have a store credit engine. There's quite a lot of functionality that BigCommerce offers out of the box that with Shopify, you have to install an app to get those functionalities. And Shopify is trying to catch up as quick as possible. One of the biggest advantages that Shopify has over BigCommerce is they've got a native point of sale system. So if you're an omni-channel business and you're running 5 physical retail stores and you're running an online store, then you can have one completely natively integrated system out of the box. And you can be running Shopify payments both for your online store as well as in-store for in-store payments at the terminal. And then all of that is synced back to the Shopify backend. You can manage your physical store locations inventory through the Shopify backend. There's a lot of native integrations there that are really nice if you're an omni-channel business and you're really just focusing on D2C or B2C, then Shopify is a bit of a no-brainer. Once you get a bit more complex and your needs become a little bit more complex and or you want to do some serious B2B selling, then Shopify is not there yet. Whether they ever get there remains to be seen. I know they're putting big investments into B2B, but it remains to be seen whether they can achieve that or not. And yeah, so I'd say that BigCommerce is going after that absolute mid-market enterprise, smaller enterprise merchant, and B2B. That's where they've stated they think they can win and that they think they're significantly better than Shopify.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you have any thoughts around commerce tools? I think that was the last one I wrote down.
Yeah, look, I don't have deep, direct experience with commerce tools, but it is a pure headless platform. So they don't offer a storefront. And so the reality is if you're going to be doing a commerce tools implementation, you're going to be doing a headless implementation. They're going to be your backend system. They're going to be your catalog engine. They're going to be your discounting engine. They're going to be your pricing engine. They're going to be doing all the backend heavy lifting that you need for both B2C, D2C, and B2B. Although I anecdotally, I've had to come in and rescue the odd Commerce Tools project that just blew out timelines, budgets, just became a lot more expensive than what was originally expected to be. There are, I don't want to speak out of hand, but the reality is you have to be ready to put some serious time, just like any headless deployment. I'm not saying this is just Commerce Tools, but Commerce Tools is very much targeted at enterprise merchants. It's got enterprise functionality. It's got an enterprise price tag, and you need to be ready to pay for an enterprise grade implementation and integration project. Because if you're not ready to go and spend between 500,000 and $1 million on your implementation, then you should probably really reconsider Commerce Tools, because it's an enterprise platform, and you have to go in with an enterprise platform expectation in terms of project timeline and budget. And if you don't, you're probably going to be disappointed. So you just need to be ready that if you need that level of functionality and customization, and you effectively want to build a completely bespoke front-end experience with Commerce Tools on the back end doing some of the heavy lifting from a catalog and back end commerce management perspective, then great. Consider Commerce Tools. But remember, you're also going to need a headless CMS. If you have a significant CMS capability requirement, you're going to need a headless CMS, whether that be Prismic or whether that be any Contentful or any of the other headless CMS platforms out there. And then you're going to need to custom integrate both of those back-end systems into your front-end experience. And so you need to be ready to do some heavy technical lifting when you go into a Commerce Tools project. Otherwise, you'll probably get burnt.
All right, that was all the questions I have for this session. I appreciate you answering them.
No worries, man. Listen, fantastic. As always, have some clever questions, always have some clever things to say, and I always look forward to our chats. Can't wait to catch up again in a couple of weeks, man. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.